So Coach Hugh Freeze entering season 2, no surprise there. And the Auburn offense is undergoing a massive overhaul for what it looked like in the previous season. Offensive coordinator gone. And now you have a new offensive coordinator in here, and Coach Freeze has said he's going back to his roots as far as what the play calling is going to sound like, and all of the calls are going to be. And the question that we had, well, first we'll start with the quarterback position, since I think that is the one that is the least amount of change, right? So the quarterback room, essentially the same room from last year, right? If we're going to be honest, it's essentially the same room that we had last season, with Payton Thorne at the helm as QB1. And the quarterback two debate, I guess there's a debate about that as to whether or not it will be Hank Brown or Holden Geriner, and then followed by Walker White. Gone is Robbie Ashford, who was the, I guess, quasi QB2 last year, right? He got some opportunities last year to come in and play, and swapping out possessions. But he was really, I mean, if we're being honest, was a package quarterback, right? Like, he wasn't a guy that was really allowed to run the entirety of the offense. He was coming in to run a specific set of plays that they would utilize at particular times. Now, the rhyme or reason as to why they were using uh him in certain instances, I don't have the first clue as to what that was. And frankly, I'm glad to see that era of confusing play calling be well in the rear view. I hope that we don't get an opportunity to see whether or not Coach Freeze is willing to revisit that with any quarterbacks in the future, because it just didn't make any sense. I didn't understand the utilization of when it was happening, how it was happening, why it was happening. And Robbie Ashford just was being kind of thrown out there at places where it threw off the rhythm of the drive. It threw off the rhythm of the quarterbacks. All of those things, the play calling just didn't make any sense last year. So hopefully we don't get to revisit that era of Coach Hugh Freeze play calling ever again, or Philip Montgomery play calling, or whoever was responsible for making that a thing last season. You don't really have the potential of having that coming up this year unless you're going to have Sam Jackson come in and visit that space. And gosh, I really, again, hope that that's not a thing. Utilizing Sam Jackson in unique ways would be something I'd be open to. And I'm saying I'd be open to it as if I have to say so, but still, as a fan watching it, I would love to be able to see him utilized in some unique ways. I don't want to revisit having Holden Geriner tried out there as a wideout for a double pass on the most obvious uh trick play in the world, right? Sam Jackson out there makes a little bit more sense, since he is labeled as a wide receiver, will likely be able to run some routes, go out there and do some things. So utilizing him on a trick play, though not super surprising, is something that makes more sense because he could actually do something besides throw the football in that instance. So the quarterback situation seems to be more settled going into this season. I think everyone is, whether you agree with the decision or not, settled on the fact that Payton Thorne is going to be the starting quarterback for Auburn next season. And Auburn fans should get behind that, right? Like, whether you have reservations about it, whether or not you feel as if it's the best decision, it is the decision that is currently facing the Auburn family. Get behind Payton Thorne as the starting quarterback, and him as having the potential of being a capable starter. That's the word I want to use. Capable starter for Auburn going into next season. But the question that you have to ask yourself is, where does this staff stand on quarterback number 2, as Mike G jumps in and joins us in
Hey,
the conversation here on the Weekend Tailgate? The question you have to ask is, where does this staff stand for QB2? I didn't get an opportunity to say, well, I had the opportunity, but I was just doing so many things. Happy Memorial Day to Memorial Day weekend to everybody out there. If you have family that has been in the service and passed, and condolences to you all, but thank you for those of you who continue to service our country. But hopefully everybody's enjoying their Memorial Day weekend. But we're talking about quarterback 2 right now. And I mean, is there any legitimate debate as to whether or not it's Hank Brown at QB2 in your mind, Mike G?
there is. Now, we've talked about this all offseason. A lot of people speculated that Holden might actually be gone.
Right.
I think the fact that he came back speaks to the prospects of him having a shot in there at QB2. Hugh
Okay.
Freeze had been pretty consistent about putting Holden. It wasn't even a consideration until the bowl game to jump Hank pass Holden. So, his teammates still have a lot of really good things to say about him. They think that he has a great arm. He does a lot of the things that Hugh Freeze wants out of a passer well. But you have to ask, with the weapons that they feel like they have now on the outside, does that level the playing field for somebody like Holden, who is, Payton Thorne now is the only quarterback in this room that has a chance of starting next year that is a threat with his legs like
Well, I mean, Walker White, but he's not going to
this
start.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah, this year. Right. Yeah. And so, I'm looking at Holden, and he's got to be a danger with his arm. Now, does Hugh Freeze I think the same logic applies to Holden that you apply to Payton in the passing game. They felt like Payton would be a better quarterback if you upgrade the pass catchers around him. I said, look what happened when he had Keon Coleman and those guys, right? From what I understand, the same logic is being applied to Holden. We may see a better Holden Geriner. Now, his feel for the pocket is what's going to be under scrutiny, and this is where Hank Brown catches up quite a bit. In the small sample size that we've seen Holden in the game, you can argue whether it's been fair or not because he's been throwing in a lot after it's already been a disaster.
Right.
But Hank got his one shot, and he did something with it.
Right.
That was probably even more a disaster when he came in the game. But I think the decision to return for Holden Geriner speaks to his prospects this season to holding on to that QB2 spot. This is it, man. I mean, this is it for Holden here.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Right?
seriously, if he doesn't get a chance at QB2, I don't really know why he stays at Auburn. I'm with the people who were surprised. I've said it. I was surprised that he stuck around going into the fall this time. So I just don't know how he remains here if he's not at least QB2 going into the season, or have a legitimate shot of getting some playing time if there is a pivot at quarterback and they go to Hank Brown as the 2 and it doesn't work out, and then Holden gets his shot. Even in that scenario, I think Holden might be out of here. Like, I just don't know that he goes into the season as QB3 and says to himself, I want to be at Auburn next year.
Yeah, well, we know that he's going to be an Auburn graduate in December.
Right.
So he'll have, I guess they all got unlimited transfers now, but he'll be doing so as a graduate with an Auburn degree in December. That's a huge accomplishment for that young man. I think that's only 3 years for him.
Yeah.
Actually, in terms of getting his degree and then moving into postgraduate studies. But look, Holden is a smart guy. He is, a teammate that has been consistently chosen by his peers to throw to them at Pro Day when they needed a reliable passer.
True.
Now, to me, this boils down to, if you're Hugh Freeze, do you believe Holden Geriner holds up in the pocket? Can he stand in a SEC caliber, pocket in a game and deliver a pass accurately?
Right.
Consistently. Hank showed us that in the small sample size.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue that the sample size that we've seen of Hank Brown is no bigger than the sample size we've seen of Holden.
It's almost identical.
And so, going back to Harsin.
Yeah.
So, what do we know about Holden as a QB? There's a lot of people who have given up on Holden Geriner. I haven't necessarily given up on him because I don't know that Hugh Freeze has given up on him.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to have somebody with, if it's not Payton Thorne this year, it's going to be somebody with little to no experience starting a game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he talks about catch radius. Why? Well, if you have a quarterback that's not that accurate, or maybe experiencing game jitters, you need a guy like Cam Coleman for him to throw the ball up to. And we saw all 3 quarterbacks, 4 during A-Day, try to get the ball to that guy, Cam Coleman.
Yeah.
So I think that the pass catchers have a lot to do with giving the quarterback some grace. I think that grace extends to Holden, and I think that he decided to come back. It points to some conversation that was had between him and Hugh Freeze. There's no way he agreed to come back without sitting down, talking to them about where he's at, what they need to see from him, and what it needs to look like in fall camp to go in with that QB2 spot. Hank Brown, look, man, credit to that kid. He made this a debate in the bowl game.
For sure.
If he never gets in that game, I'm not even sure this is a debate.
Yeah, so, I honestly think Hank Brown made the conversation for QB1 something that fans were willing to debate more vigorously.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, too. But Hugh Freeze showed his hand in terms of his thinking. Like, he said, look, We feel like it was more the pass catchers than the quarterback. And if we upgrade the pass catchers, then it will solve some issues until we get to that guy at quarterback.
Right.
Now, is Walker White that guy? Well, we won't know till 2025. You're not going to find out in 2024. Now, and they're talking about possibly Juju Lewis coming through. A lot of noise around Juju Lewis right now, I'm hearing. And listen, we leave the recruiting to the recruiting experts, but on our side of the camp, we understand there's a strong push being made for Juju Lewis,
right,
to possibly come in here and be the guy as well too.
Yeah, I mean, so
with the pitch that I got Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson waiting on you when you get here. So if you're really that dude, it's best man up. Every program has to deal with this. I love me some Walker White. However, you got to play the best guy. So Walker, I mean, he's got all these guys. They have to make astronomical leaps this season to solidify a spot for next spring that doesn't involve them either bringing in a high-profile transfer or some high-profile freshman to take your job.
Yeah.
So for Holden, this is it, man. This is it. Or maybe he needs to look at stepping down a level where he will be the guy he can show off his arm, kind of like what TJ Finley did. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, listen, that is always my advocation to any player is go and put film out there. It doesn't really matter what level of school it is. If it's not Power 5 football, it's fine. There are plenty of starting quarterbacks in the NFL that did not play for a P5 school or P4, whatever it is now, school. So, get that out of your mind that you have to play at a certain level to be able to make it to the next level. You need tape to get to the next level.
Yeah. Listen,
sitting on the bench for a P5 is not better than playing every single snap for, a group of 5 school or an FCS school. It's just not. There's no way you can convince yourself that makes sense. So go out there and get tape, and if that means humbling yourself, then do that. But whatever it takes to get to your dream, that's what you need to do. And I get the financial situations that kind of make some people say, hey, well, the bag ain't there in these other schools, but the long-term play is always going to be
always
the best
the NFL. Yeah, for sure. Now, look, if you don't feel like you have a career at the next level and you want to get the bag now, I don't fault any kid for that. Get the bag now, start your life ahead in the black instead of in the red, and you move on from football after it's all said and done at the college level. But I mean, there's the dichotomy of situations that we've seen from Auburn quarterbacks. Again, TJ Finley had a shot at 2 different schools to be the guy at the Power 5 level.
Mm-hmm.
Right, ended up going to Texas State.
Yeah,
right. Didn't win the job there, and then finished in the top 20 in the NCAA in passing yards. Now, does that mean he's going to go on to be a pro? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
However, right, if there were any chance that he had to show anybody that he could maybe be a quarterback, he did it the only way he had left.
Right.
He could not remain under the delusion that he was going to get a shot at another Power 5 school.
Yeah,
no
matter how
LSU and
much
Auburn,
he felt like, no matter how much he felt like his talent was P5. And listen, he clearly convinced 2 coaching staffs that he had P5 talent. But at the end of the day, none of that actually matters, because if you're going to just sit on the bench somewhere, it doesn't help you. And with the tape that he had out there already, that wasn't enough to convince NFL scouts.
Man, honestly, I think what Auburn may be faced with at the end of the year, I know we're talking about Holden, but what Auburn may be faced with at the end of the year is Holden and Hank out of here.
Yeah.
If those guys want to be quarterbacks at the Power 5 level, if you're Hank and you don't win QB2 this year, and you don't see any significant game time by mid-season, you're making plans mentally to move on from Auburn, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And you at least have a small sample size of tape to say to another power school, bring me in, make me a serious backup, or you step down to a group of 5 school and you say, or one of the bastards from the ACC or the Pac, now in the ACC, and you say, hey, listen, I could maybe do it at your school. I've been training at the Power 5 level. I just need somebody to give me a serious shot to train as the starter. Both those guys, I think, could find a home. But as far as this year's concerned on the Plains, if Payton Thorne does not have a great year, Hugh Freeze, for a lot of reasons, has to move on to Walker White, a high profile transfer portal QB, or a high profile 5-star freshman.
Yeah.
Those are his choices after the season, unless only scenario where he doesn't do that is Payton doesn't work out. He moves on to one of either Hank or Holden, and one of them balls out so hard. I'm talking about 300-yard passing games. At the end of the season, beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. They're going to need a really, really big showing from those guys, Ike.
Yeah.
To keep the potential newcomers and Walker White at bay.
I agree. So let's and I'm gonna bring in C into this conversation as we pivot and talk a little bit, because I asked this question earlier in regard to what does Payton Thorne. Is there anything that Payton Thorne could do to lose his spot? Now, this is going into the season, and we'll get into during the season, but I'll ask this question differently about the QB2 situation and see if you want to jump in and chime in on the quarterback 2 situation. If we're putting out a depth of rotation right now, it's Payton Thorne. I think most people would put Hank Brown at QB2, Holden Geriner at QB3. Most people. Now, I don't know where the coaching staff sits with that. I'd say if we were to poll the general consensus of the fan audience,
Sure.
or the Auburn
Some
fans would
some
say
fans
that
would
that's the
probably
order.
even put
My question is,
maybe go up number 1, when you listen to some of the fans, right? Yeah.
yeah, no, but I'm saying, but like the vast majority understand not what you want, but what
Right.
you think the
Sure.
coaches will do. You would say
Yep.
PT, Holden, Hank Brown, then Holden Geriner. My question is for the quarterback 2 situation. Having that be the case going into the fall, if you are Holden Geriner, what do you need to do to flip flop that order at QB2 in your mind? See, what does he need to do to make that a situation where he makes a serious push to be
I
the
think
backup
that in the
quarterback for Auburn?
fall, you're going to have to show in scrimmages when you get opportunities that you are a guy these coaches can depend on. If they needed to put you in the game, you need to give them confidence that when they put you in the game, you're going to perform well. And the only way you do that is in the scrimmage. One of the things that we were listening to in spring was that it was Peyton Thorne and it was everybody else. That narrative has to change
Mhm.
in the fall, starting with fall camp and those scrimmages. You need to change the coach's mind in that regard, that it's no longer Peyton Thorne and the rest of the guys. It's Peyton Thorne and Holden. It's Peyton Thorne or Hank. You do that by elevating your play. When you get in there and your number is called, you ball out. Simple as that. Such that if things do not go well in the first 4 games of the season and Peyton Thorne struggles, the coaches know in the back of their mind it's no longer just Peyton Thorne. We got another guy who has shown in fall camp that he can be trusted, or at least we can trust him to put him in and see what he does. You got to take care of first things first. You got to even put the thought in these coaches' head that you have more than one guy in this room that we can roll out there.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
hold
got
on.
a little
Wait before you jump in, Mike, because I want to ask you a slightly different question, but it's going to be in the same vein. All right, because you said that if Peyton Thorne finishes out this season as the quarterback 1, he doesn't turn into a disaster and they have to move on, doesn't get injured, they have to move on. That means that likely these inexperienced quarterbacks that people have no idea what they actually can be are going to be going into next season, and the coaches likely will be moving on to stellar freshman Walker White, stellar freshman
If
transfer.
Juju works out,
It's going to be
yeah.
someone who is not right. It's going to be somebody who's either not in the room right now, or they're going to say, Walker, it's your turn, right? Is there anything that any of these 2 quarterbacks we're talking about right now, Hank Brown and Holden Geriner, could do to do what C just said and say, hey, well, maybe I can turn the keys over to those guys if they don't get the opportunity in 2024 to see the field?
Oh yeah, look, y'all seen the movie Inception?
Yes. Okay.
They snuck into the dude's dream and
Right.
they planted the genesis of the idea. You need to hire Leonardo
Okay,
DiCaprio
got it.
Okay.
to get
Christopher Nolan
get
first.
into Hugh Freeze's mind and be like,
Holden's the best. Holden's the man. I love Holden so much.
right? That's the only way you're gonna get him off Payton Thorne. This man is not going to move on from Thorne this season unless Thorne literally just stops showing up.
But so not even this season. I'm talking about, like, do they have a shot like you feel like there's no shot for a Hank Brown, Holden Geriner QB1 conversation going into 2025 if Payton Thorne finishes the season as QB1?
Yeah, I think it's going to be extremely difficult. I think that those guys have to be able to show something in the game. Now, is there a scenario where Auburn is blowing teams out and those guys are coming in the second half of games and showing
Maybe
a little something?
But if you
with
but
their
if you're
arm?
but if you're
Yeah,
but
Is
if
that
you're
enough,
blowing
though?
teams
Right, that's
out,
that's my question.
then you don't
Maybe.
have a QB situation.
Yeah, maybe,
Okay.
but like it's still game tape. That's all I'm saying. I'm trying to think of a scenario where these guys can get game tape to be judged by, because practice. We're talking about practice,
Right.
like,
and that's kind of my
you
point.
have
Is like,
plenty of practices.
is it hopeless at that point in time, right? Because if you're holding, right, like again, if I don't see the field in 2024 for Auburn, do I like what is my point?
I'm
What's the point
I'm
of me
speaking
staying
more.
another
I
year?
don't think there's any point.
If you're Hank Brown,
But I guess my
what's the
question to you
point?
guys
I
is:
just don't think
you were there at practice, Mike, in spring. Was there a reason those guys were Was there a reason those guys weren't being talked about, Hank and Holden? Was there a reason for that? Was it clear that Payton Thorne was the better QB?
Yeah. Look, but I don't think that's saying a lot. Like, I saw the same Payton Thorne.
Sure, but my point is,
You're right.
Payton was being Payton.
Yeah,
But Payton, but regular Payton
correct.
we've
Yeah, the things
seen
around
was
him
still
have changed.
better than what those two guys were showing. You're telling me that if those two guys play to where regular old Payton needs to step it up, you're telling me that still doesn't change Hugh Freeze's mind?
Yeah. You in practice?
Scrimmage, practice, whatever the case.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that is I think that's subjective. I think personally that those guys have already done that. Thought they were doing it last fall.
But it
I
just
think it was
wasn't
pretty
enough.
You're correct. Yeah. So I don't like. I think that they were playing better than Payton in camp last fall. Now, whether they're the better quarterback on Saturday, that's a different discussion, because Payton Thorne has a lot of game day experience those guys don't have.
Right.
And that has to be factored into this. So if you're Freeze, again, I think that he thinks this is a bridge year to where he wants Auburn to be. And I think that Payton Thorne is the guy that he wants to get him there. And only under extreme circumstances is he going to come off of that.
Okay.
So can these guys do
it?
Hold on, wait. So can these guys do anything in practice to change that narrative? In my mind, no. It's not going to be about practice. It's going to have to be about, again, you got A&M, Cal, and New Mexico to start the season.
Mm-hmm.
And any of those three games, Auburn is going to have to be ahead, preferably Cal, because they're a Power 5 team coming to Jordan-Hare, right? But if you can get in the second half of that game, throw some accurate game day passes, look like a quarterback. If you're holding, this is your bugaboo, man. Right? Because Hank came in and showed that he could do it. Oh, yeah, he got 9 throws. He made the best in most of them. That's right. So if you're holding it, you get a chance to get in versus A&M and New Mexico, maybe Cal. You got to tear it up. You got to put points on the board. I'm not going in, and they have to let him throw the ball.
Yeah, I think that's well, no, you're right, because last time he got it, he just turned around and handed it off.
Yeah, and then they got to let him throw the ball.
Yeah.
They did this to Holden under Harsin when he got in, and then they did it under Freeze. So they've got to let them turn it loose and see. And if you're Freeze, why not? Let those guys let it fly, because you might have to, in case of emergency, break glass in case of emergency. Payton Thorne gets hurt, or isn't playing well. You Freeze, you can't have another 6-6 season.
Yeah.
Guys, I don't care how long fans think he has. 6-6 this year means you had a disappointing loss to somebody you were not supposed to lose to. Absolutely. With 8 home games.
Truth.
You got 8. You got 4 on the road, and they're 4 really tough home games. Right? You got Georgia. Yeah. You got Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky, and Alabama on the road. Right? I would love to see them beat Kentucky, no matter where it's at. But if you lose those 4 games, you got 2 more that you're going to lose, and one of them is going to have to be at home. And it's going to be disappointing, I promise you. So that's the way I'm looking at this. He's got to win 6 games.
Right.
He's got to win more than 6 games, but 6-6 is it makes the seat extremely hot for year 3, in my opinion. No matter what you think he's building, because it likely means statistically you haven't moved the needle very much. You can't have another sub 2,000 yard passer at quarterback.
Right.
That's crazy low. He said during the interview that we did with him that Payton Thorne's pass attempts were the fewest of his career for any quarterback.
Yes.
So the only reason he comes in under 350 attempts next year is if he doesn't finish the season as a starting quarterback and you split those reps. But when you total them all up, they better total 400 for all 12 games from all the quarterbacks. You got to let it fly. And they don't particularly have a choice because you promised Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson that they were going to get the ball.
Right.
And you may have sold them that their time will come in 2025, but their opportunities start today.
Yeah.
Right? And that starts with letting your quarterbacks let it rip and getting those, continuing to get those guys. Okay, we all know we all agree Cam Coleman's going to be a day 1 starter.
Yes.
Right? We're all in agreement here. Perry Thompson may not be. So in those second halves of games, who may be throwing Perry Thompson the ball? Holden or Hank? And that's a great opportunity for them to show I have some sort of chemistry with the receivers of the future. I don't think it's going to matter if they're throwing the second and third string guys. Honestly, if they get in and they're throwing the second and third string, I think that there's going to be an opportunity, a rare opportunity for the backup in a blowout game to throw the ball to what will be considered to be primary receivers 100% next year. So Malcolm Simmons, Bryce Cain, if those guys get in, tear it up with them, and that's how you make a stronger case for next year with the experience, because it's going to be hard, man. Look, fans should prepare themselves now for quarterbacks to exit this program.
Sure.
Yeah, I think people thought it was going to happen this year in more of a mass way.
I love Walker White, but I could see a scenario where he's not an Auburn Tiger in 2025.
Depending on what happens with the Juju Lewis situation how. And so let me ask this question before we get into the break, because this is what, hearing you guys talk, I thought about this. Juju Lewis potential out there. Coach Hugh Freeze said this last year. I don't have the clip of him saying it, but he said it going into last season when he talked about Payton Thorne being the guy who he was going to kind of lean on to be QB1, is that, you know, he hasn't really seen a lot of transfer quarterbacks tear it up in year 1, but year 2, yes. Here's my question for you all. Does that mean that he feels a little less prone to going after a transfer quarterback going into next season? Or is he going to put more trust in the guys that he's developing in his room right now? Caesar, what do you feel about that? Do you feel like he'll go to the portal? Here's the question in the brass tacks of what I'm getting to. Is he just selling us fluff because he didn't want to go get somebody to replace PT and spend more money? Or is he just out on the idea of a transfer quarterback being the answer?
I think a part of it may be a little bit of fluff, because he went after a QB in the transfer portal once the season ended last year. He just decided to go to Notre Dame, if we're just going to be honest about it. So it's not like Hugh Freeze did not look at a QB in the offseason, right? He did. It's just that he was not going to pay.
But so let's alter the question. Knowing what the price tag is for a transfer portal quarterback, is he just like, you know what, it's not?
He feels that way
to try to, or is he going to say
he feels
maybe
that
there's a
way
bargain
today,
bin guy out there I can bring in?
But we'll have to see how the season plays out after the end of this year.
Okay, so it depends on how poorly it goes this year, whether or not he gets more desperate, or the powers that be
I
that
think
write the
a
checks
lot of
get
that
more
hinges on how this season plays out. Today, he will tell you, no, it's too much, right? I'm not going to do that. But you haven't had a year 2 under your belt, and we don't know what this looks like with you in control at the helm. If this goes bad, he may have to go to the portal and find a QB as a stopgap to stop the bleeding, in my opinion. He may have to if things do not go the way he's planned for it to go.
Well, your Payton Thorne funds free up come December. So there should be some money available for a quarterback. I think that was the holdup this year. because it would have had to have been a guy that he could make a really strong case for if they were going to get one out of the
Yeah.
portal. It would have had to have been a can't miss guy, and I don't know that they really liked anybody in the portal $1 million much. Because that's, so it was, yes, we're going to do our due diligence and we're going to take a look. However, there's not anybody in there that moves the needle enough for me to go back to the money people and say, I got to have this guy, even though I told you that about Payton Thorne. They tried to act like Payton was the guy that they were targeting the whole time. I'm calling cap on that. But, but I do believe that they thought Payton fit what they were trying to do for the next 2 years. They expected more out of him. Unfortunately, they let Payton down. You brought Philip Montgomery in here. It was a disaster, right? You didn't have staff alignment. You think you have it now, but that hurt him in year one. So if you think that all those things are solved, and we know Hugh Freeze his tendency is toward build it from high school. But he also has the win now culture
but this is
of the current NCAA.
But here's the thing, Mike. This is technically year one for Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, so,
in year two. That's Hugh Freeze doing.
Way,
right. So if it doesn't go well, it speeds up the timetable. So, I don't know if you can stick to your plan the way you drew it up initially, because you basically crapped year one.
Yeah, it's such a bad. I think at quarterback, this conversation changes. It does, because you have time at every other position. You do.
You have time for guys to like develop, you mean?
To bring guys in.
I was about to say, because the patience of the players, you might not have time.
Yeah.
And that's really my concern about all of this is like, listen, you sold guys on a vision that are dynamic playmakers. Are they going to be willing to? Because if you go in, and the reason why I asked this question again, Payton Thorne goes through this season, it doesn't look good offensively. And you've got Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Bryce Kane, Malcolm Simmons sitting there. And now they've got to endure year one of an unproven QB or year one of a transfer QB coming in that may not work out. How much have you basically crapped away the lease that you have on your future if you don't get it right this season?
I'm gonna answer.
Well, here's the what is get it right though? What is get it right? To me,
look competent offensively enough for them to believe in the system and your development at quarterback.
Okay, that's rude, but I'm gonna ask.
Sure, go ahead.
Can they show a competent attack, but you have a QB that's struggling? Does that help in the minds? Because we had neither last year, right?
Yeah, no. The answer to that question is no. Not a struggling QB, right? Listen,
it was struggling all the way around. You got the system. The system looks good, but you have a QB that is struggling.
Yeah. I don't. Your quarterback is struggling. That's struggling.
I don't think you can stick with a struggling QB and still ask for patience. I think if you're trying out a bunch of guys and it just doesn't work with any of them, then maybe you can say, you know what, we just don't have the guy on the roster right now. But if you're just stubborn and saying we're gonna make it work with this guy and not go to any of the guys that are on the bench, I don't think you get that patience.
Well, so Walker White has to make an astronomical leap from where he's at right now to next spring to be the guy. Like that's what if Hugh Freeze, that's your ideal scenario. Walker White just looks the part and feels it, and you have so much confidence in him. You go out and you recruit another guy from high school, you turn this thing over to Walker White. If it's not Walker and the other two have not stepped in for Payton, or listen, if Payton balls out, I still think, let's say Payton balls out. If Payton Thorne has a great season, Holden and Hank are still done here.
You think both of them are done even with a good season from Payton Thorne?
A great season from Payton Thorne, both those guys are done, because that means that they likely had no shot to move the needle on the field. I don't think there's anything they're going to do in practice at this point under this coach to move the needle.
So that was going back to the question I was asking you. It's inevitable that without there's not much that they can do on the field this year that would have them feeling confident that they can compete for QB1 next year if Payton Thorne keeps the job the entirety of the season.
Correct. That's correct. Yes. I don't know, because if they're coming in garbage time in the games like I said, they have to look. You remember how Auburn fans felt about Jeremy
Yeah.
Johnson when he played that one half
Yeah.
for
Against
that's that
Arkansas. Yeah.
against Arkansas? Yeah, for Nick Marshall. That's what it's going to have to look like. Almost 300 yards and a half and
No,
like
he
three
looked. He looked.
TDs, I think.
People were talking about him for
He had it
Heisman,
a half.
like when he took over as a
Yeah,
starter.
yeah, we were like, whoa, this is the backup? And it was supposed to be the beginning of the change where, hey, Auburn has a good enough passer where we can be pass first, and that sets up the run rather than the run setting up the pass. That's what Jeremy Johnson was supposed to be. It didn't happen that way. So, yeah, to me, that's where you have to be, right? You need a performance from one of those guys that gives you the Jeremy Johnson feels, but like
So
without the
what does
Jeremy Johnson results next year.
what opens up the opportunity for that, assuming that Payton Thorne does improve and has a good season?
That's why I referenced Inception. Right? We're gonna come full circle here. That's why it's gonna take some luck, I guess is my point. It's gonna take a little bit of luck. It's gonna be after one of those ideal scenarios where not ideal, because you never want to see anybody get hurt.
Right.
But like, it's gonna take some luck. There have been better quarterbacks that have won their job due to the guy in front of them being injured and just didn't give it back.
Right.
Where would Georgia be right now if JT Daniels never got hurt? How long would Kirby Smart have stuck with JT Daniels in that first year if he did get hurt?
Yeah.
Right? And Stetson Bennett ended up being their guy. And he made it all the way to New York the next season, which validated that decision. But if JT Daniels doesn't get hurt, I don't know if we get a two-peat from Georgia. Let alone a one-peat.
We at least never
Right,
know what you
right.
have in the backup quarterback, because
That's
I think they
correct.
stick with. Let's stay on that topic. We're gonna go to the break because I want to ask that question specifically for Auburn next year. For full episodes, make sure you head over to the War Report's YouTube channel and check out the Weekend Tailgate. Every Sunday, we're going live. Join us on the live stream at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Until the next time, War Eagle.